Our next question is from Lenny. So finances play a major role in upward mobility, education, and housing. Lenny, could you speak on the impact that race plays a role in individual or family financial situations?
Absolutely. My fellow panelists kind of throw me a lob over here. So Liz touched upon this in her opening remarks. Erica shared that she grew up with some of what I'm going to speak about, and even Cecilia mentioned living in a particular area due to school district. So when we talk about finances, it's hard for us to not talk about redlining, which was mentioned earlier before. This goes back to post-World War II era, and Black communities have still not recovered from that. It's sort of like a domino effect. When you think about once that first domino starts to roll, it's hard to stop that momentum. The Federal Housing Administration refused to insure mortgages in Black neighborhoods, so Black Americans became shut out from one of the most common avenues for accumulating wealth, and that is home ownership. Today, median Black families have 10 times less wealth than median white families. Systemic racism carries significant economic costs because it prevents people from making the most of their economic potential, particularly consumption and investment. Even today, there are still reports that make it necessary to hide one's identity when selling your home due to anti-Blackness. For example, being offered less when those that are looking to buy your home realize that a Black family or a Black person lives in that home, where people who are selling their homes now take down their pictures so that way no one knows who owns the actual house that's being sold. So chasing the American dream becomes that much harder depending on your racial identity as an American. Fortune 500 CEOs who earned approximately $14.5 million on average included just 4 Black people and 10 Latinx people, which is 3% of that total. Meanwhile, Black and Latinx people make up about 45% of the US working class, who would benefit from an increase in federal minimum wage to $15 per hour. So when we talk about how finances also impact healthcare, think about working class people who need to work in the middle of a pandemic because they have to make sure that there's still income coming into the household. When we talk about trying to accumulate wealth, it's hard to overcome some of the racism that exists in the credit industry. So when you think about people of color receiving higher price loans or higher percentage loans than their non-Black or their white counterparts, even being more qualified. You talk about decades of trauma making people of color reluctant to deal with federal financial institutions. But ironically, because of that trauma and them protecting themselves from harm, they are distancing themselves from those institutions that they actually need in order to thrive. Just recently, a large bank CEO cited that their bank failed to reach its diversity goal because of a, quote, lack of qualified minority talent. That same bank paid out nearly $8 million to settle allegations in hiring discrimination and a separate $10 million settlement for discrimination against minority borrowers. So when we think about how all of these kind of impact one another in a domino effect, it affects us right here at home too at St. John's University in the creation of the department that I work in right now in student development and RISE mentoring. We focus on Black and Latinx students primarily because they are the most at risk for not being retained or not graduating from college. So the program was implemented to kind of help combat that, because we tell all of our students that education is the key to getting to that next level, but now they have to overcome lack of information that they were told in high school, understanding what happens after graduation, and their loans, which are astronomical.
Thank you so much, Lenny. That really puts into perspective, just the levels that you have to go through in order to just kind of even be equal, right? Like, it's not even equity we're talking about, just to kind of be on the same level field. As a healthcare professional, as a pharmacist, I wanted to kind of share a couple of points from a healthcare perspective. So there was a recent survey in 2016, and this was a survey that was conducted with medical trainees. And what they found was that these trainees, these physicians, believed that Black people's skin was thicker than white people's skin, and that Black people's nerve endings were less sensitive than white people's nerve endings, and also these again educated folks thought that Black people's blood coagulates more quickly than white people's blood. So when you're thinking about it, these are folks who are treating patients on a routine basis, and that leads to a lot of decision making afterwards, right? So and as we know, race is not a biological construct; it's a social construct, and yet these kind of this kind of training, or lack of training, I should say, then leads to further sort of a discrimination down the line. So, for example, when you're thinking about maternal mortality, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely than white women to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. And then also when you're thinking about, there's so many other things. Black women are less likely than white women to get breast cancer, but 40% more likely to die from breast cancer. So there are so many aspects like this. Like when you're thinking about diagnostic criteria, there's a lot of race-based content in there, implying that it's a biological thing when it's not. So I guess like my point on that is, there is no racial difference between people when you're thinking about treatment. What it is that racism is a risk factor. Racism is the cause for these differences. So I just wanted to share that from a healthcare point of view.